Hello, Mooncrafters. Welcome back to Craft of Moon. My name's Ryan Hunt. I'm an astrologer, a coach, a psychedelic guide, and I have been covering the rise of the hegemonic power that has come front and center starting here in 2025. Looks like Minneapolis just had another shooting. We're going to be covering a little bit about that, but I wanted to talk about the nodes of the moon, the nodes of Pluto, the nodes of the planets, how those play into things, because I've been talking a little bit about that. So stay tuned and we'll dig right in. All right, so the first thing that happened today is in the news. We have another shooting in Minneapolis. Minneapolis, Minnesota. So what I wanted to do is just kind of take a look at that for a minute. And I'm going to play, the way this is going to go, I'm going to play a few news clips. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the commentary of those news clips based on some of the things that I've recently been talking about in some of my recent videos. You can see those in the playlist. The latest one was the Hegemon Rising. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the news clips and how that plays into what we've been talking about. And then I'm going to move into pulling up some slides, just talking a little bit about the nodes and understanding what those are astronomically, how those, and archetypally, and then how those play into the interpretations of what we're seeing play out around the world. So let's go ahead and flip over here to our news clip. This should be a news clip of the, the ICE and immigration officials in Minnesota. Let's take a look.
Fly away. Don't move. Stay here.
Oh, wait a second. This isn't ICE. This is not ICE. Sorry about that. This is the wrong scene, or maybe it isn't. Hard to tell these days, isn't it?
Ready, arm!
Yeah, that could easily be ICE in Minneapolis, but let's flip over here. This is what we want to see instead. All right, let's just take a look at this. This was this morning. This is January 24th. It's 11:35 a.m. Pacific time in Berkeley, California. So this was earlier this morning in Minneapolis. This is not Star Wars. This is real. This is real life.
The press have taken up positions up on a snowbank here off to the right, and they have been completely tear gassed out. You see this massive cloud. This is what I'm talking about. They throw so many canisters that it creates this massive cloud that is wafting throughout this entire neighborhood.
I mean, it keeps going on. I mean, here's more.
Southern end.
Just because they're not wearing white doesn't mean they don't have the same kind of symbolism. Here. You know, Star Wars was great about really exacerbating the symbolism. So just because these ICE agents aren't wearing these white, blaster-proof uniforms.
Yeah, we're seeing a plume of smoke coming from the north. Can't be sure as to exactly what it is. Back up.
More.
The man is trying to scream out his name. What agency they're with here? Looks like
more. We see it all over the place. More.
Ice out! Ice out! Ice out! Ice out!
More. See?
Lightning press is that these agents were somehow just trying to. Yeah.
So that is what the news came up with this morning. And these are like real life events. And we saw this happen a few years ago with George Floyd protests. We've seen this happen, the marches on Washington we've seen happen. Like, there is this just incredible opposition that is taking place between the people, the subjects that are being ruled, and the ruling elite class that is doing the ruling. And there is this force. When we look at Star Wars, when we first saw the movies, the Stormtroopers were portrayed as evil, and it really worked out well for developing this kind of tension in the movie, this theatrical experience. And later, as some of the different follow-on works, the different movies and the different TV series that have been put out around this have come out, there's been times where the Stormtroopers have been more humanized, right? And so we see the human component of the Stormtroopers and how in many ways they're forced into the situation, or they don't have a choice, these kinds of things. So there's a much more human component to the Stormtroopers, and we finally see that they're actually humans behind there. Let's go ahead and, before I jump to the next thing, this experience of the hegemonic power, the Stormtroopers, this clash between the populations, and we've seen this throughout history in the U.S. and around the world. We've seen populist uprisings. We saw it in France. We saw it in Germany. We saw it in Russia, China. We've seen it in the U.S. So this is not something that is new, as in in the current zeitgeist is not original. This is a kind of like a replay in a way, or the remake of the previous movies. But what I was talking about in some of the previous videos, and you can go back and take a look at those, where I talk about the astrology of the capture of Maduro and how that's significant in our current time. I also talk about the takeover of Hawaii and how the archetypal lineups of the astrology of that tie into the current moment. So there's a lot astrologically that's going on, and what is happening right now astrologically that is influencing the zeitgeist is this hegemonic rise. And we've been watching that for several hundred years. We're going to watch it for several hundred more. We're about 2/3 of the way through the cycle of it right now. And that 2/3 point is kind of a tipping point for where we are in its continued development and evolution. So you can take a look at some of those videos. Also, in this process, I've been specifically talking about the nodes of Pluto, the nodes of the planet Pluto. And I do have a class on Pluto that's coming up this coming Wednesday. It's the 4th installment of the 5 cosmic catalysts for your best year yet. It's through synchronicityuniversity.com. You can still purchase access to that session or buy the recording afterwards. It dives deep into the archetype of Pluto and how we can track that and integrate the themes of Plutonic experience into this current year. So take a look at that. It's definitely a different vein from what I'm going to be talking about right now. It's more about how to harness the archetype of Pluto for your best year, how to take that and turn that into a personal catalyst and personal transformative power. But I do want to, focus on the world a little bit. It's just so striking. And so let's drop into another news clip here. Let me get it ready. This is the scene of Donald Trump, the president of the U.S., arriving in Davos. Okay, let me get it queued up here. Oh, wait a second, you guys aren't seeing that. Let me flip back here and go back to that. And And here we go. Oh wait, another one. This isn't the president arriving in Davos. What was I thinking?
Rise, my friend.
The Death Star will.
All right. So yeah, that wasn't the current president of the United States arriving in Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum, even though it kind of looked like it. Here is the president doing that. Hold on a second. Here we go. Okay. Yeah. It's hard to tell. They look so similar, and there are certain similar elements to this. It's hard to kind of like tell them apart sometimes. Yeah. So anyways, that was... They did forget the thematic music during that moment. I'm not sure who was in charge of sound for that helicopter landing and the red carpet walk, but they didn't have the thematic music going, which was unfortunate. Yeah, so yeah, we're watching in real time these kinds of things unfold. And we're seeing a lot of stuff happening with the United States right now, and being a US citizen, I feel like I can kind of poke fun at it a little bit. But one of the things that I want to point out around the astrological archetypal arising of the theme of the hegemon and hegemonic power in the world is that it is not specifically tied to any one country or any one person. This is a worldwide global phenomenon that we are experiencing. And I do want to, kind of setting aside some of the joking, I do want to show you a few words from Carney's, the president of Canada's speech, or not the president, the prime minister of Canada's speech at Davos. So hold on a second, let's flip that up here.
Stability. And because of that, we could pursue values-based foreign policies under its protection. We knew the story of the international rules-based order was partially false, that the strongest would exempt themselves when convenient, that trade rules were enforced asymmetrically. And we knew that international law applied with varying rigor depending on the identity of the accused or the victim. This fiction was useful, and American hegemony in particular helped provide...
Okay, so notice he uses the word hegemony, and sorry that my screen was a little bit wonky when he first started. He uses the word American hegemony. This word is entering the zeitgeist. If you haven't read the book, Orson Scott Card's The Hegemon is a great book. Highly recommend it. It is a work of science fiction. It's not, grounded in reality, but I think that if you haven't read it and you're interested in, understanding how often authors, artists, poets seem to be able to foretell the future, it's a good read. So take a read at it if you want to. It's called the Orson Scott Card's The Hegemon. I'm just going to play a few more words of Carney here, but I just wanted to point out this use of the word hegemony, and we see that in the news cycle is starting to pick up now that Carney has started using it actually on the global stage from the mouth of a real world leader. We're seeing it start to come out into the news cycles a little bit more as well. Let me go back here, and I'm just going to rewind just a little bit. And let's just hear a few more words of this.
This fiction was useful. And American hegemony in particular helped provide public goods, open sea lanes, a stable financial system, collective security, and support for frameworks for resolving disputes. So
he's
we
talking about how
placed
good the hegemony was
sign
right here.
in the window. We participated in the rituals.
Right.
And we largely avoided calling out the gaps between rhetoric and reality.
And I want to point out where he's saying that we participated, because he's talking about a merchant hanging the sign in the window in Germany to just kind of go along with stuff. And he's talking about how we, Canada and the rest of the world participated in this hegemonic expansion because they found that it was beneficial and good. And now, obviously, they're kind of like re-looking at things a little bit. So let's hear some more.
This bargain no longer works. Let me be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. Over the past 2 decades, a series of crises in finance.
So when he's using the word a rupture and not a transition, the contrast between those two words is Plutonic. Rupture is a what we think of as transformation, right? And a transition is something that's slower, right? Let's hear that just again, what he says.
Of a rupture, not a transition.
Right? Of a rupture, not a transition. So something that he's talking about, the contrast that he's talking about is something that's almost more explosive, instantaneous. It's like a bubble bursting, as opposed to a process that is moving things in a new direction.
Over the past 2 decades, a series of crises in finance, health.
A series of crises in finance and health. Crises is another Plutonic word.
Energy and geopolitics have laid bare the risks of extreme global integration. But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerability.
Coercion, vulnerability. These are all very Pluto-oriented themes. So we're seeing it happen in real time here.
You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination.
That's just too, I got to replay that again for you. Let's just listen to that one again. I've listened to this talk several times already. It's just, if you haven't listened to this whole talk, I highly recommend watching and listening to this whole talk. We have not seen anything like this on the world stage in my lifetime, in the reframing and the reorientation of the way that a world leader is actually posturing themselves. A world leader in terms of an ally to the NATO, the United Nations kinds of stuff. Obviously, we have world leaders that posture in all kinds of ways, but we're talking about the Prime Minister of Canada here. So let's just listen. I just rewind just a second here.
You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination.
When integration becomes the source of your subordination. Integration becomes the source of your subordination. And we just got to go back to that Star Wars themes, right? Let's just go back there for just a second here. Let's watch this.
Fly away.
Integration becomes the source of your subordination. Right? When integration becomes the source of your subordination. Think about what's going on in Minneapolis. Those words are powerful. When integration becomes the source of your subordination. Right? Let's go back over here to Minneapolis.
Restore law and order to the streets.
We are
of
seeing
Minneapolis
integration
form. That's likely how it's going to be framed.
in real time,
point out from what John and I saw here on the ground,
being the source
bullshit.
of subordination.
What happened was the federal government shot and killed another U.S. citizen. Shot and killed one of its own citizens.
Cole Jordan.
This is integration becoming the source of subordination right here.
Yeah.
I mean, this is powerful stuff, you know. Let's go back to Carney. Just listen to a few more words. I think it's such a powerful speech.
The multilateral institutions on which the middle powers have relied, the WTO, the UN, the COP, the architecture, the very architecture of collective problem solving are under
Collective
threat.
problem solving. The architecture, that's a Saturnian theme. So he's talking, so he's, you know, when we look at this whole speech, when you listen to it, it's almost like it was written by an astrologer. I mean, it's wild. I definitely recommend listening to the entire thing. Now I'm going to flip over here to just a few minutes of a newscast, and then we're going to move into some of the more talking about the nodes and Pluto and stuff like this. But I think all this is really good setup. You know, this is really good, important this is setting up what's going on in the astrology. We're seeing the real world play out of what I want to talk about here in a minute astrologically.
There. But I'm concerned that our allies look at us and say, we lack the self-correcting mechanism that we thought they had.
But
We
Trump
lack
would
the self-correcting
argue
mechanism.
These allies have nowhere to go. Even if we were an A+ before, if we're an A- now, you still have to stick with us. We're the biggest and
Wait
the
a
best.
second.
So
You're
I
hearing
think
it, but you're
that's
not
what
seeing
made
it.
the Mark Carney speech.
Let me flip this over here. Yeah, there you go. I'm not going to rewind because you heard it, but here, let me just keep playing it from here.
When he stepped forward and said, we have to start thinking about other ways. If you notice, Carney went to China. You know who else went to China? And I don't know if he went or it was announced, was the Prime Minister of England's going to China.
Carney goes to China. Prime Minister goes to China.
You asked me about...
So that's we didn't get that to the part in Carney's speech because there was, you know, it was starting to lull a little bit in its excitement, and it wasn't specifically relevant to what I was talking about. But Carney went to China and got himself his own individual trade deal with China over electric vehicles for Canada without working or coordinating with the United States. And now what they're reporting here is that the Prime Minister of England is doing the same. We're going to see the leaders of countries all over start doing this. And why I'm pointing this out is because in the rise of the theme of the hegemon, the Pluto-oriented themes that I'm talking about, this is not something that is specific to the U.S. It's not specific to the president of the U.S. It's not specific to the country of the U.S. This is a global phenomenon. You know, one of the things I did is I looked back at the European Union and the formation of the European Union. I think that I put that on one of the videos. If not, I'll go back and check the videos to make sure that one got published. But I did an analysis of the formation of the European Union on for relative to this Pluto Nodal Axis and how it's playing into the overall world themes. But like, I remember like when I was growing up, the European Union didn't exist, right? It became formed in 1993. And that itself is a hegemonic expression. When we see the formation of the United States hundreds of years ago is a hegemonic expression. It's the aggregation of power, the transformation of power, moving power from old to new and new into an aggregated experience. So let's listen to some more of this just for a minute here.
The economic part of it, I'll also give you a security part of it. If we're going to reign in China, it's going to be together with our allies. Not sure we have those allies because now they're saying, I got to do a deal with America and with China. I'm not going to let America take the lead on the deal.
See, I got to do a deal with America and with China. So this is that the arising of two powers that are going to be competing, as opposed to a diversity of power. So the hegemonic experience, the hegemonic expression is more and more consolidation and making fewer and fewer choices around governance. Just a few more words here.
Deal of reigning in Chinese security.
Yeah, it was a lot of walkbacks, but I do think the most embarrassing moment was pretty much obscured by all of the drama, which was the Board of Peace. Where
the Board of Peace.
This is important because people miss.
Yeah, this is important, right? So the Board of Peace is another symbol of this hegemonic expansion. And we're seeing this, all this hit the tipping point when Mars went Cazimi with the sun, or just before, just as Mars just as the Mars-Venus Cazimi was forming. This Mars, this expression that happened in January, earlier in January of this year, where we had Mars and Venus Cazimi with the sun and Mercury co-present in the sign of Capricorn. This has only happened, it happened in, I think, 800, so in like a 3,000 year span. We're talking about from 500 BCE to 2500 CE. The nodes of Pluto ingressed into Capricorn in 444. Then we had the Cazimi, the Mars-Venus Cazimi in Capricorn with Mercury co-present, happened in 810. It happened again in 26. And it happens again in like 24 something. So in this entire cycle of the Pluto Nodal Axis, right? In this entire cycle of the Pluto Nodal Axis being in Capricorn and Cancer, this Mars-Venus Cazimi in Capricorn with Mercury happens 3 times, neatly dividing the cycle into 4 chunks. We have the first from 444 to 810, 810 to now to 24, whenever it is, and 24, whenever it is, to 2741 or whatever it is, right? So these are 4 nice, neat little chunks. And we, in that cycle, we are right now halfway through when we think about that cycle. So there's this Plutonic expression that is rising. We're about halfway through when we think about the relationship to the synodic cycles with Mars, Venus, and Mercury and their connection to Capricorn. And we're about 2/3 of the way through in terms of relative time, Saturnian time. I think just a few more words here, and then I'm going to jump into some of the other material.
Because it came at the end, but it was really embarrassing. $1 billion a membership. It was meant to be like Mar-a-Lago. We could not. Yeah,
so that's Board of Peace. Yeah, I got distracted. But the Board of Peace is a concept that was created for Gaza, now is being turned into something that is, a group of people and countries that are willing and able to pay $1 billion for entrance into this club. Or, it's the formation of a more centralized Kabbalistic power with Trump as the head of that until he dies, which we don't know how long that's going to be. But then he appoints his own successor, which could be his child. And then they appoint their successor, right? And at that point, that is the establishment of an empire. We have an emperor at that point. And even if he only minorly succeeds, once he gets a few $billion from these countries and they're in it for life, the money is going to get them, what's the phrase? Yeah, they're going to be invested in this, in the ongoing structure of this. It's basically the reestablishment of an empire is this Board of Peace.
Not get anyone in there who was a sort of NATO good ally.
Hey, isn't Kazakhstan? What's
Kazakhstan.
And so what they're saying here is that none of like our allies are joining this board of peace. And so what's happening is the empire is being formed with countries that are antagonistic to or minor players in the world stage, but are not currently part of the power structure that exists within NATO and the United Nations.
And we got Russia. He took Mark Carney's invitation back because he was mad about that speech where he wasn't named.
So this is the petulant emperor, like taking, like one trying to get you to come to trying to get Carney in Canada to join, and then like yanking the invitation, right? So I think that's enough for this newscast. Now what I want to do is just talk about the word plutocracy itself. And you should see it here on the screen. It's just the Wikipedia site. It is a little bit blurry. Hopefully it'll start clearing up here. I'll read it for those who can't see it because it's blurry. A plutocracy, from ancient Greece, Plutos, wealth, and kratos, power or plutarchy, is a society that is ruled or controlled by people of great wealth or income. It can be considered a specific form of oligarchy, rule by the few, where the ruling few are wealthy. The first known use of the term in English dates from 1631. It is not rooted in any established political philosophy. So I think this is an important thing. We hear in the news, we talk about the rise of oligarchy, and oligarchy, it means the rule by the few. But really what we're talking about is a plutocracy, a plutarchy, which is a very specialized form of an oligarchy. And this is important because the root of the word plutarchy and plutocracy is Pluto. And that's what we're talking about in the archetype of the oligarchs, of the plutarchs, of the hegemon. We're talking about Pluto. Pluto is power, wealth. Pluto is the archetype of the most absolute power. Pluto is the Lord of Death. And nothing that we know of survives death. Everything that is born dies. Death represents the absolute power that cannot be denied. And so when we use the word Pluto, this is like saying a deathocracy, right? In a way, a deatharchy. It doesn't sound as sexy as a plutocracy, but even that isn't really sexy. The term plutocracy, it says down here, under usage, it says the term plutocracy is generally used as a pejorative to describe or warn against an undesirable condition. Dollarocracy is an anglicized adaptation of the word plutocracy and may refer to specifically American version of plutocracy. And I'm just going to give a little bit of a plug here so you can see it. Here is, it's kind of like off screen, but this is from Synchronicity University. And if you go scroll down, you'll be able to see my class number 4, Pluto the Transformer, is over here. $35 right now. It's a bargain. Head on over there, synchronicityuniversity.com. And join the rest of the course. Join Pluto or join all of them. There's a bunch of other great programs. This is Synchronicity University is run by Nadia Shah, fantastic person who's supporting astrologers all over the world. So kudos to her. Just wanted to plug that a little bit. And then I think, next what I want to do is flip over. Hold on a second. Let me just come back over here. So that's, we looked at some of the poking fun with the Star Wars themes. We looked at, the real tragedy that's going on in Minneapolis right now. There's tragedy all over the world happening. And I don't want to just because it's happening in Minneapolis and it's closer to home, I don't want to kind of like smooth over the fact that this is tragedy is happening all over the world, in Iran, in Ukraine, in Gaza, in, just all over the world, we're seeing this stuff. So, the U.S. people in the U.S. get really shocked when it's kind of like comes home to roost so close to home. It is shocking here in the U.S. It's not something that happens normally, but what we're seeing is that this is kind of like the new way of things. And it's important to think of it like that because this archetype of Pluto is a global rising phenomenon. And we had this tipping point here just a few weeks ago. We're still in January. We're still in the middle of the tipping point, really. But astrologically, that tipping point was the Mars-Venus cazimi of 2026. So early 26 was the tipping point for this. We're going to see it. We're going to see it continue to rise, but lost my train of thought there. Sorry. Let's go on. So the next thing that I want to talk about is I'm going to bring up the nodes of... Yeah. So I'm talking about the nodes of Pluto, right? The nodes of the moon, the nodes of any planet. What are the nodes? Yeah. So really, I want to kind of help clarify that for people. What you're seeing on the screen right now, and I wonder if I can, if I draw on it with this laser pointer, you're not going to be able to see that, I don't think. I wonder if I draw on it with an actual pen. Give me just a second. Yeah, you can see the pen. All right, so what we're looking at here is a very crude diagram. These purple lines represent kind of the if we were to look at the solar system sideways, right? We have the sun here, the center of the solar system, and then planets orbit the sun. This will pretend this is the Earth, and we'll pretend this is Pluto here. Now, the planets orbit the sun, but they're not all exactly perfectly flat. It's not like they all are in exactly the same line, but they do all kind of fit in this band, kind of like there's this band. And so what happens is you've got like here, Pluto is orbiting, and it's going to orbit, and imagine that it's going to come around like this and come over here. I know it's kind of crazy drawing, but just kind of like pretend you can imagine. Meanwhile, the Earth is in its orbit like this. And they're kind of at an angle to each other. And this angle is its obliquity. It's a kind of a fancy term, the obliquity of the orbital planes. It just means that they're kind of like they're at an angle to each other. So let me erase that and go here to the next slide. So this is a little bit of a different view of it. And what I want to point out here is, so this is again, Pluto over here, the Earth right here, and where the orbital planes intersect. Even if this green ring is going to be smaller, actually, the reality is it's going to be much smaller. It's inside. They don't necessarily have to touch, but where they would touch if they were to pass by each other, right here, this is what we're talking about when we say the nodes of the planets. And the moon does the same thing. We could imagine that this is the moon and this is the Earth. right? And then it would have the same thing where the orbital plane of one body intersects with the orbital plane of another body. That is what forms the nodes of the two together. So nodes represent a relational experience between two orbital bodies. And where the one planet goes below the other plane, this is called the descending node, and where the planet then goes above, and we're thinking and when I say above or below, I recognize that the solar system, the galaxy, the universe doesn't have an orientation of above or below, but we're using above or below as the north pole of the sun is what we think of as above, and the south pole of the sun we think of as below. So that's how we're determining above or below from this standpoint. So when we talk about the descending node, it's where the planet is north of it's north of the middle of the sun, and then it drops down, the orbital plane kind of drops down. So anyways, that's where we see these nodes. Now, right now, the nodes of Pluto are in Capricorn. It's where the south node is at. This is the symbol for the south node. This little upside down horseshoe with little kind of like loops here. And the north node, again, this is the symbol of the north node. The north node of Pluto is in Cancer. And now a lot of the planets' nodes are in the Cancer Capricorn axis right now. Sometimes they vary outside of that, but Pluto is one of the I know astronomers call Pluto the dwarf planet now, but it was a planet. They called it a planet for a while, but we're just talking about like one of these long cycle bodies that are orbiting us and that are within our ability to kind of like understand the timeline for it. I mean, Pluto orbits every 250 years, and so these nodes represent kind of an extreme evolutionary points in the ongoing development of socioeconomic situations here on planet Earth. So this Capricorn Cancer axis is what I'm talking about. And this is what has been the nodes of Pluto have been in Cancer and Capricorn since 444 and will be there till 2741. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the nodes of Pluto being in Cancer and Capricorn. All right. The next thing I want to point to here actually is, let me just advance the slide. So the ascending node, this is just kind of like a little write-up talking about the archetype of the ascending node. This is the portal of emergence. The ascending or north node is the archetype of the great intake. It occurs where a body rises from the southern or lower latitudes into the northern or upper hemisphere of the ecliptic, symbolizing an upward surge towards consciousness and manifestation. In Vedic and Tibetan traditions, this is the head of the dragon, Rahu or Rahula, a point of voracious appetite and ambition that lacks a body to digest what it consumes. It represents an evolutionary hunger for new experience and uncharted territory. So this is the north node, and right now the north node of Pluto is in Cancer. And Cancer is a sign that many of us that have been studying the zodiac recognize as a sign that symbolizes the desire for safety, for security, for being at home, for staying inside. That's not to say that people that are Cancer, that have strong Cancer placements, always need to stay inside. But the archetype of Cancer is the crab that has a shell and is, soft on the inside and needs to be protected and, scurries to stay hidden. And, there's this kind of Cancer, archetypal understanding based upon the animal, the the Zoidia that is the totem of that zodiac sign. So Cancer represents this kind of like need for safety and security, and this is what the world is hungering for. Like, that's how we can think of the Pluto North Node in Cancer. Is this, there's this, the archetype of hegemonic power is utilizing the craving for safety and security to further its evolutionary incentives through the different world orders. So that's kind of what we're talking about with that ascending node. So the descending node is the archetype of the sacred surrender. It marks the point where a body sinks below the ecliptic plane, symbolizing a return to the roots, the past, and the collective unconscious. It's the mastered past. This is the tail of the dragon, or Ketu, representing past karma and the innate mastery. It is the dominant hand, what is easy, habitual, and naturally mastered through previous cycles of existence. So again, in Capricorn, we're seeing this planet of this Capricornian experience being manifested as what is habitual. The power structures, the structures of things, and the rising of power, the dominance of authority and authoritarianism is in many ways a Capricornian experience. And then last, I think I have one more slide on this that I want to bring up here. So the south node of Pluto in Capricorn is the collective hegemonic grave. It's a multi-millennial immersion into the rigid structures of power, hierarchy, and systemic control that has defined the human experience from 444 CE and will continue until 2741 CE in the archetypal synthesis of nodal movement. If the ascending node is the breath of resurrection, so the ascending node is where we're trying to get to. We're trying to get to that safety. We're trying to get to that security. And notice this, all of this stuff, all the border control, trying to expel immigrants, talking about the criminals and the murderers. This is all to play on people's need for safety. None of this is playing on people's desire for freedom. There's something strong about the fear of not being safe. It's animalistic from, all animals want to be safe. Dogs, cats, raccoons, humans, we all want to be safe. We search out the places where we're going to feel safe and secure, our homes, our dens. We find small places and holes in the ground to, keep ourselves safe. This is a fundamental need of biological existence, this need for safety, and manipulating the emotional need for that. Because of the North Node in Cancer, we are highly susceptible as societies to the idea that our society is not going to be safe, and we respond to that in ways that are predictable to the hegemonic power systems. All of this, when we look at the Star Wars expansion of empire, it's about safety and security, prosperity, making things work smoothly. We don't want to rock the boat. We want things to stay in a way that, isn't scary, right? And that is what we're trying to even if we're not conscious of it. That is what the North Node of Pluto is talking about. It's talking about the global societal movement towards safety in a way that expresses the willingness to surrender freedom to acquire safety. And that is how the hegemonic expression arises, persists, and grows. And we're going to see that continue to grow over the next several hundred years. And that's why I say it's not about one leader. It's not about Trump or Xi or Putin or Carney, or it's not about any of these individual leaders. And it's not even about the individual nations. Those are the vehicles through which this hegemonic archetype, which is, we can think of the hegemonic archetype of Pluto as a real living entity within the minds of sentient beings on the planet today. And that this archetypal expression, this emanation of Plutonic power and hegemonic control is arising and strengthening across the world because of this need, this evolutionary need for safety, as you know, in the willingness to surrender freedom. Right? We think of the when we think of the Cancer Capricorn axis, right? That is in a square to the Aries Libra axis, right? Which represents freedom and harmony, freedom and equality, freedom and balance, initiation and cooperation, individualism and relationship. So this Cancer Capricorn evolution that's taking place with Pluto is all about safety and the need for safety and the willingness to surrender that safety for, surrender our freedom to acquire that safety. And this is at odds with, it is squaring off with our need for freedom and harmony. And so that's the evolutionary expression that's going on right now. And let me just actually, one more thing before we go. I'm just going to pull that up. I think I have the chart of the US up right now too. We can just go back to that. Where is my Luna? Yeah. So we can see here, and I think I can draw on this. Maybe not. I don't have my brush tool available, but I would love to be able to draw on that. Let me see if I can. Here we go. Yeah. So I think the screen brush is not working. Let me just double check that really quick. No, you're not seeing it. Anyways, you can see, hopefully you can see that we have this in the US chart. We have Cancer in the 8th house. We have Pluto and the south node of Pluto in Capricorn in the 2nd house. And then we have Saturn in Libra, and the Libra Aries axis, which is that individual freedom and expression of self to obtain harmony, is completely orthogonal to the Cancer Capricorn axis. And we have Saturn in the sign of balance and harmony. Saturn is the great teacher, the restrictor, the bringer of things through time. And we could, if we were just kind of like think somewhat prophetically about that, we could say that it's going to require a lot of time for the world, for the U.S., and the world that the U.S. is influencing. It's going to take a long time for harmony to be truly established through Saturnian expression. That's one way we could think about it. All right. I think that is all that I had to talk about today. Hopefully you found that somewhat interesting, maybe even a little bit amusing. It was kind of some dry humor there at the beginning, but there's a lot going on in the world, and we need to keep our eye on the ball. We need to keep our eye on what's happening. And what's important in all of this is understanding that even when we cannot stop the tsunami that's coming, we can take steps ourselves individually to prepare our bodies, our minds, our spirits, our souls, our own emotional well-being can still be maintained despite the tsunami that's coming. And that's, I think, for me, looking at astrology, looking at the planets, understanding the cycles of time and how they move in our lives and how they bring in repeat experiences and how they bring in the evolution of archetypes in our global societies. Looking at that, studying that is beneficial for regulating our own self-being and our self-autonomy. So hopefully, I mean, I'm certainly not trying to make this sound, crazy and, fear-mongering or anything like that. I'm just trying to say, point out, this is what's going on, and how do we as individuals react within ourselves in a way that allows us to be stable and confident in our own individual safety, while not letting that come at the expense of the safety and security of our neighbors, of our friends and our family and our community and our global world. How can we do that without, harming others? How do we seek safety ourselves and security without, damaging and harming others? This is, before I go, I do want to say, what we're seeing in the world is this expression of authoritarianism. And we see that in the world. We see that in the US. What's happened is we're seeing the erosion of individual rights to move it further and further into the collective. And I know, I have a lot of conservative family and friends who, for example, look at the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And what that was the overturning of Roe v. Wade was supporting the states' rights. And the people that were thinking about this, the conservative people that were supporting it, I know many of them were thinking of this in terms of, the states are taking back power from the federal government. This was a real conversational component around this of the states are the ones that should control this, not the federal government. But this was an illusion, because what this actually happened was the federal law empowered individual rights. And so what this did, the Supreme Court overruling this is this took away individual rights and pushed it to the states. And so we're seeing states' rights being revoked and pushed into the federal government. We're seeing the rights of the Congress being taken over by the executive. We're seeing the court being used by the executive to solidify its power. So everywhere we see this, the aggregation of power is moving away from the individuals, away from smaller bodies of organization, and aggregating it into tighter and tighter control of fewer and fewer people, fewer and fewer bodies, states, organizations, countries, getting it into smaller and smaller. This is the oligarchy experience. This is the Plutarchy experience that we're seeing rise in the world right now. And it is Plutonic. It is the essence of Pluto rising in the world right now. The rise of the hegemonic power. All right. With that, my friends, I think that I am going to call it quits if I can find my outro scene. And until next time, keep your eye on the sky and make a wish upon a star.